So, how's it going, guys? It's me, Zilla99, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Zilla Godzilla 98 name change. Now, the reason this became an issue is because High Flyers Tag Team, another YouTuber, did a post talking about how the trademark to Zilla was up, and because of that, Zilla is now back into Godzilla, and therefore Godzilla 98 is still Godzilla, blah, blah, blah. This has been celebrated by some people who are genuine fans of the film, but I understand why people don't like it, and others are being apologists, and you know how those kinds of people can be. But the reason I'm here is to talk about why his little post was wrong. Not because he was malicious about it in any way, shape, or forms. I think that he was being genuine about this information and think he was kind of providing a big scoop. However, the issue is that how copyright and trademark works in the US, Japan, all that stuff is not as simple as he makes it out to be. So, to begin with, if Zilla is no longer trademarked in the US, does that mean the character is no longer trademarked in Japan? No. That does not mean the character is no longer trademarked in Japan. American and Japanese trademark are different. Like international copyright law, that does not exist. People sometimes say something like that. If they tell you that, it's completely ridiculous and they are a flat out liar. How copyright works, it's dependent upon your own native country, and that's going to have to depend on a lot of different factors if that copyright is being protected in a different country. This is why stuff like fair use is a big issue in the US and Japan and stuff like that. I think a good example of this on YouTube is with a lot of the Toei Kamen Rider stuff. Technically, if you were using Kamen Rider footage for transformative purposes and that's for use in America, that may still technically be infracting on the trademark law in Japan, and that's why Toei's bots and all their people can still take footage and all of that nonsense. So that's kind of like the reason why you'll see inconsistencies with trademark law, copyright law, stuff like that between nations, is because there was no such thing as international copyright law, and that is dependent upon group to group. So what does this mean for Zilla? It just means, simply put, that the trademark is still alive and well in Japan, and it's just no longer available in the United States. But to get into more details about this, Zilla and the design itself, when it was Godzilla, that was always Toho's character. The fact is that Sony, despite making Godzilla 98, they never had full authority when it came to the design, and they didn't really own it. They were licensed out to make Godzilla 98. So what I mean by license is that Toho, obviously, they were paid a significant amount to create the film, which TriStar did do. Toho gets a lot of money, Sony gets a lot of money, and Sony was allowed to use the character. However, that licensing agreement would end, and that is when the rights reverted back to Toho, and that means Sony could and TriStar could no longer make any more Godzilla products. However, the only thing from Godzilla that Sony still has full rights to, and that is an international full rights, is the film. Both Sony and Toho, they have rights to the film in perpetuity. Sony across the world, while Toho has it in Japan. Once again, that shows how there is a difference with copyright law when it comes to America versus Japan. But with the copyright icons, how this works is very simple. A lot of the characters for Godzilla, whether it be on toys or movies or books, you'll see those small little copyright icons that usually signify which monsters appear in which films. This is also accompanied by legal jargon that essentially says so-and-so character is property of so-and-so company, so-and-so whenever the character was first created, to the recent date in which the new product was published. So, for example, if we wanted to say Godzilla, the original Godzilla, that'd be Godzilla's property of Toho, 1954 to whenever the product is being made, so let's say 2020. So it'd be 1954 to 2020. That's how essentially all that legal jargon works when it comes to copyright law. But in Zilla's case, in America, the last time the copyright was used was in 2016. That was for Godzilla Oblivion. And the last time the character was used in Japan was in 2018, around the time Project Mechagodzilla and Planet of the Monsters were written, those being the books, not the films. So, once again, this no way impacts the Japanese trademark of the character. But a lot of people will also point out Kiryu. Kiryu was the name that was given for the trademark icon of the third incarnation of Mechagodzilla What does this mean necessarily? Well, in Kiryu's case, Kiryu is called Kiryu in the film as well as Mechagodzilla. That doesn't really change the fact that those are both his canonical and technically legal names. However, Kiryu was trademarked as MFS3 Kiryu in America for a little while, this around the time during the Pipeworks games. So that's why you saw Kiryu have a different trademark next to Heisei Mechagodzilla. However, this copyright would be defunct, and Kiryu would later on be rolled into the Mechagodzilla trademark. However, there are exceptions, such as, for example, Super Mechagodzilla is technically a different trademark to regular Mechagodzilla, and the regular Mechagodzilla trademark is different in that it contains Kiryu, Heisei Mechagodzilla, and Showa Mechagodzilla, as well as Mechagodzilla City. It's very weird how copyrights work, is because if you can argue to a point that a character falls within a trademarked name, then that is why they will fall under certain trademarks. And of course, this does and includes stuff such as the perpetuity of things when it comes to how long the copyright lasts for, which is why Kong, for example, King Kong had the rights to it have been held by many different companies, some of which have now been defunct. But that still technically means the copyright belongs to them. But since it's been so long since the film was made, Kong technically falls into the public domain, and that is just Kong itself, like the name Kong, not King Kong. King Kong is still technically trademarked, which is weird. But outside of like all of that weird legal nonsense, what does this mean for Zilla as a character? Well, it means he's gonna stay, and he can still appear in material as his own monster, and it still technically means that him and Godzilla 98 are one and the same. The reason I say this is for a few reasons. One of which is that Patrick Tatopoulos, who designed the 98 Godzilla, considers Zilla to be his character. Therefore, there is no distinction between the original creator and the new design, regardless of superficial or character differences between 98 and Zilla. Not to mention, Toho, who owns both characters, sees no distinction between the characters and flip-flops between the names of Godzilla USA, American Godzilla, Godzilla 98, Zilla all the time. Specifically, this can be corroborated by what Matt Frank said when he was talking with the people at Toho if they wanted to use the American Godzilla for the IDW Rulers of Earth comic line. An American equivalent to this, but not exactly the same, would be Shazam. So the reason I bring up Shazam is because that was a character created by Fawcett back in the 1930s. And when I say Shazam, I mean Captain Marvel, because that was his original name when he was a Fawcett character. And later on when he was also a DC character. But the reason he got his name changed to Shazam was because there was also Marvel / Captain Marvel, who was the Marvel character. Of course, Marvel had full rights to this character, but DC and Fawcett had their own legal battles, which allowed DC to take control of Fawcett's characters, namely Captain Marvel. But by the time they did, Marvel / Captain Marvel was already kind of a recognized name, and they had a copyright on that name, so they had to change the name to Shazam to allow the character to keep on going. But just because the character technically was copyrighted as Captain Marvel prior to Marvel does not mean that we still call the character Captain Marvel despite it being legally changed. And of course, like, there are other things, like canonically, there are incarnations of Shazam from like really back in the day that you'd still call Shazam regardless of it technically still being Captain Marvel. It's just a lot of technicalities, a lot of semantics, and the argument really boils down to a lot of apologists using the legal argument as a way to justify still calling characters things when really by this point retroactively changing them regardless of like the legalese and all of it really doesn't matter. But a lot of people then also ask, well, why is it that we see a lot of Godzilla 98 content but not a lot of Zilla content? That is because Toho likes money. This is very simple. Despite a lot of Toho staff, and this is the people that we actually really like, the different directors, writers, suit actors, and the stuff, not liking Godzilla 98 and being able to be quoted as saying such, the company as a whole, the corporate entity, doesn't really care and is able to switch between using Zilla's design as a Godzilla incarnation, and therefore if they license out toys will make more money because they are using the Godzilla name and not Zilla. Not to mention that in a lot of cases, if you are making a Zilla figure, it most likely would be for a Final Wars line, and unless you're doing Godzilla and a lot of the other monsters from Final Wars, there's no reason to release singular figures of Zilla without the rest of the monsters from that entire film. This has nothing to do with whether Final Wars is less popular than 98, which a lot of people have used as an argument, which I don't really fully understand. That's not a matter here. It's just a matter of money, not because, oh, the films are more popular. But that's neither here nor there. But hypothetically, if Zilla was no longer trademarked in America or Japan, what does that mean for the character moving forward? Well, that means you'll probably never get to see 98 again ever in any new material. Like, new canonical material with the character would probably never appear again because it's a Godzilla design at this point again, without any kind of weird gray area. And every company is not going to be wanting to use that Godzilla design. They'd rather use any of the more numerous and popular Godzilla designs out there. But of course, that's not really the case here. And with Zilla, he'll still appear. And even if, like, this muddies the waters whether Godzilla 98 is Zilla or not, Zilla is going to be the version of the character that would appear going forward in a lot of cases, unless it's toys. Because an example of this is actually this little picture right here that you've been seeing. This is from Godzilla Kaiju Collection. This was back around 2016-ish. And despite having numerous Godzilla incarnations for this game, there was no Godzilla 98 incarnation, but there was a Zilla incarnation. So anytime multiple Godzilla incarnations are present, Zilla will appear. But if they're selling toys and Toho wants to get more money out of a company they're licensing to, they'll just say, oh, well, you're using the design and you're covering it under the Godzilla name, so give us more money. It's just a matter of greed and a lot of legalese and jargon. But in conclusion, no, Zilla is not a defunct trademark. The trademark is still well and good in Japan, just not in America, but that could change at any time. That's all, guys. I'm Zimzilla, and I'll see y'all next time.